All right, I thought maybe I'd just do a little wrap up on the long voyage we just did with this boat going from Wilmington, North Carolina to Snead Island, which is over in the Tampa Bay area. We did basically two 4-day trips, broke it up in the middle. There was a strong cold front coming, and I docked the boat in St. Augustine and left it for a few days, went back to work and got some stuff done, and then went back to the boat and finished the trip. Turned out another front came right after that, and probably gave us more wind than we would have had if we just stayed, but that's what happens when you boat in December. One of the things I didn't talk about when we were doing that night running is this sheet we keep here. And I don't do this inshore, but when we're running all day, all night, all day, and we're offshore, I like to write down my speed, my fuel burn, the heading I'm on, my GPS position, my RPM, and then my fuel level. And if you do that every 2 or 3 hours, you'll very quickly notice if the pattern is changing for some strange reason. For example, if you had a fuel leak in a fuel cooler and it was actually going overboard and you didn't know it, you'd be using a bunch more fuel than you should be. And that would be very apparent on this sheet when you write down the fuel burn 2 hours later. If for some reason all the electronics died on this boat, I know my heading, I know my last position, which maybe was an hour ago, and if I had to get on my handheld radio and tell the Coast Guard where I was, I have this sheet of paper here right in front of me. So I think when you're offshore, you do things quite a bit differently than when you're inshore. I'm a little more serious about it, and you don't take any chances, and you check things a lot more, just because you're far from help. Especially if you end up 100 miles offshore, which in this case I wasn't, but I could have been. I also had a couple minor problems that I really kept aware of. I had a very small fuel leak in a fuel sight tube. It wasn't the main tank leaking, only the fuel that would be in the tube was leaking, and I only lost, I don't know, an ounce or two every 4 or 5 hours, so it really wasn't a big deal. I haven't looked into what that problem is, and there's one thing I've really learned, which is don't try to fix anything on a long trip. You may make it worse, and if you make it worse and you don't have parts to fix it, you've just made it worse. So if there's a minor leak, I clean it up and note it and watch it, but I don't try to tighten hoses, I don't try to tighten fuel fittings, I don't mess around with steering fittings and stuff like that, because every time I have on a long trip, I ended up making it worse and wish I just left it alone. It wasn't enough to impact my ability to maneuver the vessel properly, and it didn't impact my safety. Now, if those things weren't true, of course, I'd deal with it. The trip in the heavy weather, I don't really like driving in heavy weather, but inshore it's really not a problem. We were in very high winds, but we were in very narrow passages on the intercoastal waterway. So if you have 30 knots of wind and you're totally inshore and there's no ability for the waves to get real big, it's really quite safe. So I don't mind running inshore in high winds if there's no waves because it's so protected. I really don't like running inshore at night. Inshore at night, it's too easy for a half-sunk sailboat to be out there, a piling that lost its light, a piling that got hit by somebody and knocked over. Things that you would easily see in the day are impossible to see at night. So I would much rather be offshore at night. If you're going to start running offshore at night, I would advise you to start using the radar inshore and understand really how to navigate using your radar, understand what you're seeing on the screen, the different scales that things are at. Learn to look in the distance and say, I see that green marker. What does that green marker look like on the radar? It's a red marker up ahead I see right now. What does it look like on the radar? And just start to understand what you're looking at on the radar versus what you see with your eye. The other thing I've learned running at night is that I don't want to arrive in a strange place at night if I can help it. If I came into a port during the day and it made sense and I have a nice trail on my chart plotter, I'm pretty comfortable going back out the same way I came in. So if you're going to run a day and a half, it may actually make sense to go to dinner and get ready and leave at 8 p.m. so that you're going to arrive at your destination at 10 o'clock in the morning rather than arriving at 10 o'clock at night. So think about, if you're going to start running more than daylight hours, when do you want to be in the dark? And remember that you should plan for not being able to run fast necessarily, because wind conditions or a problem with the boat or something may cause you to run slower than you thought. So in that case, I like to have two plans. If I get out there and things aren't great, I'm only going to go 60 miles and I'm going to go to this port. If I get out there and things are wonderful, then I'm going to go 130 miles and I'm going to stay out and get to the other place at 10 o'clock in the morning. So it's really not difficult, and I think it really opens up a lot of options for you as a cruiser when you're comfortable and knowledgeable to run the boat for longer periods of time. And just remember, every ship that's at sea runs at night every single night. It's a perfectly normal thing to do once you're comfortable with it and once you're comfortable with your equipment. The other thing that a lot of people don't know is that there is a passageway that cuts across Florida. It's part of the Intercoastal Waterway. Actually, here's Tampa Bay. I'm doing this rather slowly so that you can kind of get a perspective here. There's all of Tampa Bay. Now I'm just going to pan a little bit here. Sorry, fat fingers. Change my heading. So if you come down Tampa Bay and you come down to Sanibel Island, there's a canal that's part of the Intercoastal Waterway the Army Corps of Engineers dug, and it makes this river keep going to Lake Okeechobee, comes all the way through this canal. This is all a man-made canal here. It takes you to Stuart, Florida. So this is 123 miles from Fort Myers to Stuart, Florida. And that saved me, gosh, I don't know, 350 miles and probably 3 days. So it's really nice to be able to make this trip. And because we had bad weather, I didn't go out in the ocean all the way from up here in St. Augustine, all the way through the Intercoastal Waterway, all the way through here, all the way back to the Marlow Yard. So when you hear about people doing the Great Loop, they're doing much of it without going out in the ocean at all. And my wife gets seasick. She hates being out in the rolly ocean. And there's actually a way to go pretty much from Corpus Christi, Texas, all the way to Maine without going out in the ocean, with a few exceptions. Now in this case, I chose to go out in the ocean because I saved a bunch of time and distance. Some parts of the Intercoastal Waterway, especially in Georgia and South Carolina, instead of being a straight line, there wasn't a good way for them to do that. So the Intercoastal Waterway will run east and west, up or down a river, and then cut through a little piece of land, and then run east or west another way. And it can actually be a very long distance on the inside compared to the outside. But if you're just coastal cruising and enjoying the trip, that's really not that important. Hope all this helps. And I'm on the Marlow 49. This is a new listing, and I'll be publishing this in the next few days with a full walkthrough. Thank you.